Díríb agus chuir géad fáilte chuig céileoir na féile páric lunchtime Marian Richardson. Guím banachtaí ar naomh páric ar bhar fad, díobh siúd ag baile in éireann, agus díobh se comá atá linn inniuh a chuilcheard gun down. Welcome to the National Gallery of Ireland in the heart of Dublin City. My guest today is Cúán Greene, who at 28 is already one of Ireland's most exciting chefs. The eldest of three, he grew up in a Gaeilgeoir family. He's been cooking in a professional kitchen since the age of 16 and has a master's degree in culinary arts. The former Noma chef has spent 3 years in Copenhagen, but he's now back to his old stomping ground and fizzing with brilliant ideas. Cúán fáilte
Gur mí mad.
Gur magad bhainse.
That's sin bhainse.
You come from an artistic family, a big Gaeilgeoir family. Tell me about your lineage. It's very starry, very impressive.
Yeah, I do. My parents are both artists. My dad is a graphic designer and my mom is she's an artist, but she blows glass, so she's a pretty incredible glass blower. And yeah, that's been a huge part of, you know, my childhood and growing up in that kind of art family. You know, it's been something that's really been a part of me. And
your grandfather was Éamon de Buitléir?
Yeah. So my grandfather's Éamon de Buitléir, Lally de Buitléir, my grandmother. But yeah, growing up with Éamon, quite an inspiration and something looking now, you know, that I look back and I have such an interest in wild food, you know, I can really make that connection and it makes sense.
And when you were growing up, was it a particularly foodie family?
Yes, I would, without having thought so, you know, yes, it was. I never really thought that it was an arty family either. I just kind of took that as, you know, for granted in a way. But yeah, growing up with my dad is a phenomenal cook. He wakes up thinking what's for dinner. But he's a really good cook. My mom equally, you know, they're foodies, you know. And we spent some time living in France. Yeah. So that was a real introduction for me into food.
You actually moved to France with the family at the age of 12 to a village in the Languedoc, surrounded by vineyards. A place where the ritual of eating and cooking is almost sacred. Is that fair?
Absolutely. It was a village of about 1,000 people. Saint-André-Roquelong was the name of the village. A real winemaking village. We remember on the streets, we lived on this road with on a hill, and the wine would actually be flowing down the gutters in the months of kind of August, September when they were pressing the grapes. So being immersed in that was something quite, you know, that was very special.
And going to the markets as well.
Yeah.
Everything is done by season.
Yeah, I remember my mom, you know, she'd be ushering us out the door every Wednesday to go to the market in Les Agnons, and I'd very rarely remember eating an ingredient out of season. You know, a pepper was always eaten in summertime back then, you know. So those little things have kind of carried forward with me in a way that I guess, you know, it's only really now that I'm kind of thinking about things like that. It's just something that has come quite natural.
And what age were you when you were let loose in the kitchen? I mean, really let loose.
Yeah, it's hard. Probably cooking when I was about 4 on my own. I was baking biscuits, 4 or 5, standing up, trying. I had the oven on. You know, my parents may have been upstairs in bed or something like that, and I was kind of coming up with some sort of a recipe for. And a lot of them were burnt. I'm not going to lie about it. I burnt a lot of biscuits, but there are photos of me cooking on a stool at age 4 or 5.
But back to France during the summer when other teenage pals were off kicking football, you'd work in a professional kitchen.
Yeah. Now I was kicking a football as well. You know, I loved that type of stuff as well. But my mom basically, you know, I think she was a bit fed up with me and she kicked me into a restaurant. So I started in a restaurant at 14. I did an internship in a Michelin star and I loved it.
Was it not terrifying?
It probably was. I do remember tears. One day, cleaning is a part of kitchen. They say, cooking is 30% cooking, or working in a restaurant is 30% cooking and 70% cleaning. And I remember having to scrape a wall and clean the wall and crying because I thought I'd been punished. But in fact, it was just a part of the process. And, the commie chefs have to do the worst jobs.
So you've since trained in some of the finest kitchens in Europe. I mean, you spent a long time in Noma in Copenhagen and in Quique de Costa in Spain. What's that like? What was that like going in? How did you get into Noma?
Those experiences were remarkable. How I got into Noma was just through constantly trying to. I always aspired to Noma. I always wanted to work there. And it's extremely difficult to get into that restaurant because there's such a high demand. People are just dying to even just to step in there for an internship. So I went about it in a kind of, I applied to a couple of other restaurants in the city. I got into one, I spent a year there, and through that I got into Noma.
And were you working with the famous chef René Redzepi?
Yeah, he's very much there. He's very much a presence. And I learned a lot from him. I remember going into Noma my first week, I thought, I'd worked in a couple of good restaurants, probably 8 years by that time. And I thought I was a good cook. I thought I was a pretty good chef by then. And after my first day, I kind of looked around and realized, I've quite a bit to learn still. These guys are some of the best chefs I've ever worked with. And it was a privilege to spend 2.5 years there, and essentially becoming one of those cooks. That was an incredible experience.
And what was it about his cooking that appealed to you?
With René, it's pure heart and soul. He's really, when you hear René talk, he's so articulate and an incredible, not only incredible chef but a great mentor. And what he's talking about when he talks about food, you really do listen. He's talking about all the things I believe in, and that was really important. It's about where the product comes from, knowing how ingredients are grown, the ethics of an animal, all these things I've really carried forward, and that kind of connectivity with the food is something that's really important to me. And that's something that I found immediately in Noma. And that's what essentially kept me there for the time I was there.
You also went to Mexico with the Noma crew.
Yeah.
To set up a pop-up restaurant with a dining room in the jungle.
It sounds quite
wild was
extravagant,
that?
doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I joined Noma 2 months before we actually went there. And that 2-month closure was essentially the closure of the original Noma. So we had some of the best chefs in the world come for those 2 months. They were all coming to eat to finally dine there, which was just insane. Cooking for Ferran Adria and all these amazing Grant Chachat's, all these world famous chefs. I have all those books on my, in my bedroom, and to be cooking for them was remarkable. But 2 months later, we were in Mexico cooking in a jungle. In a kitchen with 2 plugs, the rest was all fire, and we'd be cooking out in a dining room that was just sand, but 95 staff were flown over from Denmark, and we cooked with ingredients that essentially we'd never seen before. The first day I was handed a mamey fruit, which is this oval-shaped avocado that has orange flesh in the inside, like a custard, sweet in like a custard itself, but the inner seed is massive and tastes like almond. So yeah, it was quite exciting and scary experience at the beginning to be immersed in something like that.
And how would you come up with menus? I mean, if you didn't know what the ingredients were.
So we would have had an R&D team, like a research and development team. 3 months leading up to that, they had flown out prior to us, and they had developed the menu. So I was more a part of the service team that was running the day-to-day service and cooking those dishes. So yeah, it was a real learning experience. And also just an incredible living experience, just to be in that kind of environment, cooking in that heat. That was something quite, we were downing Gatorades because our salinity levels were just crazy. So cooking in live fire. I remember I was lighting a flame torch off a barbecue, and it leaked, and the whole thing went on fire. And because there was a team of 25 chefs around me, I had to run out into the sand and throw the flamethrower essentially into the sand. But it got all up my arm, so I had my whole arm scorched. So for the next 2 weeks, I was cooking by the fire with a scorched arm. And
You were still at work.
Oh, it was tough. It was tough.
I know that foraging is a big thing for the Noma crew.
Yeah.
And that's big with you too. I remember when you came back from your stint at Noma, you used to head off on your bike in Dublin at the crack of dawn to go foraging.
Yeah.
All these little secret places.
Yeah, so Noma is definitely, there's a lot of foraging, a lot of emphasis placed on wild food, ingredients that can either be collected for free or what happened was we created a full network of people who knew about wild food. And these are some of the most incredible people in the world. And they exist in Ireland too. So while we did forage a lot ourselves, we relied a lot on these people too. And we also learned from them. So I kind of took that knowledge back to Ireland and set about basically, just keeping your eyes open and trying to find wild produce. So yeah, I would get up before, I was working in Bastable restaurant in Dublin at the time. And I would get up at 7 in the morning and cycle out to the coast or to the mountain and just collect what we could for the day. And it's quite difficult. It's not an easy thing. I mean, it does sound quite idealistic, I guess, but it's actually something I really, really enjoy. It's, that time and place where despite all the stresses, it's you're just there in the moment.
And what sort of stuff would you collect? I mean, not just dock leaves and...
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Depending on the season, it's very much seasonal. And now I have a document written with all of the ingredients and their times and where I collect them. So I remember, because it can be very hard to know exactly, when did I pick that ramson, leaf, the wild garlic, or when did I collect the meadowsweet that grows on the riverbank, or ingredients like guava berries or sea buckthorn, or there are all these incredibly exotically flavored ingredients that almost don't feature in our daily lives anymore. So that's kind of what we try and do, is bring that back in a way.
Mm. And you guard the locations of these places with your life, I presume?
No. I do try and bring people along with me, and actually my newsletter now is about kind of sharing that information as much as possible.
I'll come back to that in a minute. But talk to me first about the tyranny of working in a high-end restaurant. Is it very shouty? I mean, you see Gordon Ramsay firing off on all cylinders. Is that what it's like? Stressful and horrible?
It was. It definitely was. Nowadays, things are changing. I mean, restaurants and chefs now know that is not okay and not going to be accepted anymore, which is fantastic. It's something that I've certainly suffered from, and it's not something I ever bring into my kitchen.
So like a bullying culture?
Yeah, there definitely was a bullying culture, and I'm sure there still is in a lot of restaurants and kitchens. And speaking to young chefs now, one of the first things, when they ask me, what are the things they should learn or do, and for me it's read and not put up with bullying. So get out of there if that's the environment you're in, because in these high stress environments, it is something you do come across. But good leaders, know how to deal with the situations in the right way, and it's just not worth putting up with at all.
You're telling me it's being in a kitchen like that, in a high-end kitchen like that, is like being a surgeon.
Yeah.
Cut the wrong bit off.
Yeah, it is. I had a conversation with a surgeon a couple of years ago, and it was like talking to a chef that works in a high-end restaurant or a fine dining restaurant. It was that kind of clinical, high pressure, in the moment stuff. The only difference is if he slits someone, you know, they're dead. With us, it's just a bit of food. So at times when you're in that service and you want everything to be perfect, you can see how, you know, things are so important and can get quite heated. But I've seen levels of bullying which are just not acceptable, you know, and the same apparently applies to to surgeons.
So you're sweetness and light in your own kitchen?
Absolutely, 100%.
The COVID pandemic has obviously been very challenging for the restaurant industry, but you've managed to diversify.
Yeah. For me, I guess I'm always looking to kind of to keep on going and keep progressing, and with the pandemic, it's something that didn't change. Straight away, I guess we looked at how I could help with farms, and I kind of pictured the loss of a lot of fresh produce with the downturn of all this, and with restaurants closing, you know, there was a lot of farms that had a lot of produce that would go to waste. So I ended up preserving a lot of stuff for them, and then basically giving it back to them free of charge, so they could, you know, keep that through the winter and give it to people or sell it to other areas of hospitality if needed.
And this is your Omos project.
Yeah. So Omos, O Father M, O Father S, meaning homage, duty, and respect, is basically what came out of COVID. It was a real learning experience for me, and it's about connecting community and people and creative people who have this like-minded vision of working together. So Omos basically connects all this, and in the future I am a chef, and Omos will be a restaurant. But right now we're basically about telling stories of these people and of what I do as well. And it may feature foraging, it might feature preservation, but it might also feature stories about ceramics. And for example, a time when I went down to Kerry and made a bunch of plates and bowls with a ceramicist, and we lived together and basically learned from one another to create these dynamic new forms of pottery.
And you mentioned there that you have a newsletter as well.
Yeah, so for me, you know, social media and things like that have been are a driving force, you know, to basically to tell stories. But I found, you know, Instagram and things were quite limiting. I wasn't able to tell the full story and get the full image across. So I started writing a newsletter that would basically be an honest reflection of that period and being able to share that story in its entirety. And that it gives people a full insight. So there's not only where did you get that product, because that's a question we so often get, but how did you find it? What did you make with it? And here's the recipe. So that's kind of what it's called the Omos Digest. That's what it's about.
You mentioned that you'd like to open your own restaurant.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's a process. So we're currently looking at spaces. I have an investment from an investor in the US, but we're also looking for another investor. So that's it's proving to be a mission. But we have high hopes, and there's a lot of plans in place at the moment. So much so that, you know, I'm allowing it to happen organically. I'm working with an amazing farmer out in Wicklow who's donated to Omos 2 acres of his farm with a polytunnel, and we're growing together. So we have a full plan for this year for growing, you know, heirloom product or ingredients or seeds, trees, some Japanese ingredients, and it's a real experimental kitchen, and that's the idea.
The best of luck with that.
Thank you very much.
St. Patrick's Day. Was it a big day for you growing up?
Yeah, definitely. Growing up in a household of Gaelgors, or Irish speakers, my mom always celebrated Irish festivals. It was always a big thing for my mother, you know. She'd be the first to have the hat out of cardboard made on our heads, you know, and we'd all be paraded out with the shamrocks. And yeah, my mum loves festivities and stuff like that. So Lá Féile Pádraig was a big thing for us.
And what will you be cooking this Lá Féile Pádraig?
Culcanan. We always cook Culcanan every year. My last day in Noma, I actually cooked beef shanks with Guinness and Culcanan, which was a nice thing to do.
And your girlfriend is American. How does she fit in with all of this?
She loves it. She really gets into the spirit. She didn't really understand potatoes before coming to Ireland. And when she got here, I remember her saying, you know, now I get it. Now I get it. So there's something about the Irish spud that's quite special.
The food you serve, the aesthetic is very considered, almost painterly. Do you regard chefing as an art form for your generation, continuing the family tradition?
Yeah, I mean, it's the artistry in food that within food that got me into cooking. So living in that environment all my life, I've always had that kind of creative necessity somewhat, and I found that within cooking. So, and I guess that's what drives me forward every day now. It's to find the next kind of creative output within what I do, and that mindset is always there in everything I'm doing, and I'm very much focused on food ethics now, whereas probably as a young cook I wouldn't have such an insight. So it's a constant balance between the creativity and where the food comes from that drives me forward today.
Do you think cooking is an innate thing, or do you think it's something that can be learnt by anybody?
Yeah, cooking is, I mean, it's made to be learnt, absolutely. I think certain people may have a skill in being able to put flavors together or a certain palate, but things like that are learnt, and it's certainly something I've done over the years, is work hard in restaurants around the world to get that skill and to feel confident enough. But like as everyone knows, you know, you never stop learning on it. And I never feel ready, you know, and that's what kind of drives me forward, is that insecurity to that, am I good enough, you know, and am I doing enough, and can we do better and more? So yeah, food can definitely be learnt, and we can always carry on learning.
Of all the chefs that you've worked with, and you've worked with some amazing chefs, who would be your icon, your mentor? Who would you say, I want to be that person, or better than that person?
There's a lot of them. My grandmother was a cook. She's a huge inspiration to me. But I've worked with some really, really good cooks, really bad cooks. But there's something in Renee that I just find incredible.
This is Renee Redzepi.
Renee Redzepi, yeah. There's just something about him that I really just understood, and there was a connectivity there. Something about how he approaches food and the passion and the sensitivity behind it all is something that's really important to me today.
And if you were being sent to a desert island and you could only bring one cookbook, what one would that be?
The book that I read the most is the Relay cookbook. It's a restaurant that just recently closed, and that kind of it's a very generous book, and that's what I love about it. Is the generosity about sharing recipes, and that's what I'm trying to do today. Is to not have that closed mentality and to share. So Christian Puglisi is the chef, and he wrote this amazing book, and that was really important to me as a kid. So I think that's the book I'd probably keep with me.
If you were to give any advice to a young person who was interested in being a cook, what would that be?
Actually, I just got someone who came to me not too long ago, and she's never worked in a restaurant before. She's has no connection with food really, but is just pretty set on being a part of this industry that seems so, despite COVID and everything, there's just something quite alluring about it. And for me, cooking as a kid was about, French food and, high-end white tablecloths and all this type of stuff. That's the kind of thing that we were pushed into, where foreign ingredients were celebrated. Whereas now, for me, I tell young cooks to, get into the field and learn about where the food comes from, because that's what I'm trying to catch up on now. It's not how to fry something in a pan. It's about how, to really understand that all you need to do is something very, very small to something that's quite amazing in its most organic state. So get to a farm and work on a farm, or I can't remember the name of the course, but there's an incredible course now with TUD, with its botanical and culinary course, and that's a really great course where you're actually learning about where the ingredient comes from.
Cúán Greene gur míle mágat agus gahrath ar an obair.
Green. Fáilte,